like to welcome everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us today on your busy day to learn more about a caregiver training that is being delivered through two different methods and the results of that, which I find very interesting. And so we hope to have a very interesting session today. My name is Melissa Devlin. I'm the Assistant Director of the Grand Families and Kinship Support Network. Next slide, please, Ru. For those of you who are not familiar with us, I know we do have a number of stakeholders who are very familiar with us, but there are others that are new to us. So just want to let you know about the network for a minute. We are a result of a 5-year cooperative agreement with the Administration for Community Living. We provide technical assistance to an array of systems, tribes, territories, and government agencies, and provide technical assistance in a wide array of services and supports. And while we do not serve families directly because we believe that you do that work best in your own communities, the work that we do to help support you in the long run does better support the families that you serve. Next slide, please, Ru. Okay, here are several ways that we provide technical assistance and support. We provide individual technical assistance to you. If you have an issue or you need some ideas around some program improvement, you can reach out to us. All of our assistance is free of charge. And in the chat in a little while, you'll see a link to request assistance from us. We also provide learning collaboratives and webinars such as these in order to build your competencies and knowledge in better serving families. And then we also have the centralized hub for kinship resources on our website, and that is our website address. We have over 100 resources, webinar recordings, tip sheets, and everything in between that'll help you serve the families that you're working with. Next slide, please. Okay, and here is a picture of our homepage. Our resource library is here, and then also you can request assistance up here on the top. If you scroll all the way down on the bottom of our website, there's a link to sign up for our monthly newsletter, and that'll keep you up to date on all of the resources and events that we're holding here at the network. Next slide, please. Okay. And here, if you'd like, you can scan the QR code in order to sign up for our monthly newsletter. That is the fastest way to get our resources. And also, if you are on LinkedIn, please look up the Grand Families and Kinship Support Network, and you can stay up to date in between our newsletters on everything that we're doing. Next slide, Ru. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I am honored today to have two very well-known and renowned experts in the field of kinship care and research and evaluation. I think all of you here probably know Dr. Joseph Crumbley, and if you don't, you will meet him today and just really appreciate his expertise in kinship. He is a family therapist, trainer, and consultant, and he's also a subject matter expert for the Grand Families and Kinship Support Network. And then Dr. Angelique Day is also one of our subject matter experts. She's the associate professor at the University of Washington in Seattle at the School of Social Work, and has a lot of expertise around kinship evaluation and research. So we are so honored to bring them together, two different sectors to come together and share their knowledge and expertise. Okay, and at this point, I believe I'll be turning this over to Dr. Crumbley.
Hello, how is everyone? I hope you're all doing well. I tried not to look at the names of people that were signing up because that just made me nervous. And when I started seeing names of people that I recognized, that just made me even more nervous because it's like talking to family and friends. And, it's know that, and you just know that, people are going to remember what you said. They're going to remember how you did. And makes me a little anxious, but I'm excited about it, because the work that this training was really very significant to me. So that we don't waste time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Angela had asked me to do several things. One, talk about what was the purpose of the training. Two, describe the training. And the third thing I'd like to do is to maybe kind of give you a little bit of an example of what the training is like. Okay, so those are the three things I'm going to do. So if we can go to the next slide, Ro. Here's the purpose. First of all, the training, initially I thought of the training as being just for caregivers, but then after a while, I was having other professionals coming up to me saying the training should be for both, that the training should be for both professionals and caregivers as well. The training is targeted to caregivers, that's the audience, but it is training for both professionals and service providers. And the training for caregivers is basically twofold. And I'm actually going to read it. It's a little bit easier that way. For caregivers, it's to identify their strengths and the unique experiences they provide children being raised in their care. What are their strengths? And what's so interesting is when I talk to caregivers about their strengths, it's things that they don't consider as strengths. They just look at it as normal, as natural, as what caregivers should do and be able to do. But what I want to do is to let them know that they make them self-aware of how special those skills are and how unique those skills are. The second thing is to talk about how to use them. For many of them, it's common sense. For a lot of the caregivers, it just makes sense. For a lot of caregivers, it's instinctive. And what I want to do in that area is to get them to realize that it's more than just being instinctive. Let's now make it intentional. So it's a combination of appreciating what you do and then making it intentional, as opposed to just looking at it as normal and doing it instinctively. So that's kind of what those two purposes are about. Next slide, Ro. For the professionals, I'm responding to professionals who have said that we need something specific for caregivers. Um, I'm responding to caregivers saying that they didn't like being having to take what was there for in foster care and then have to remake it, rework it, come up with hybrids. It was professionals saying we want something that's kinship specific. So that's what this is about. Providing a model of kinship specific training for caregivers that enhances and emphasizes their strengths, their resourcefulness, and skills as kinship care providers. Um, that first purpose also comes out of caregivers saying that we need something that's specific for us, that looks at our needs, that looks at our skills. Um, Much of the training for caregivers is on the job. So it's not like they had that 2, 3 month period where they're going through and being processed as foster parents or adoptive parents do before the children are placed. The children are already in the home, so it's OJT for them, on the job training. So we need something that's specific, that's now that we can use while we're hitting the street and hitting the road running. The second bullet, how to engage, recognize for professionals. Again, it's how do we support caregivers? How do we enhance their strengths? What do we need to support that, to identify it? Um, that's kind of what that piece is responding to. And the third one is kind of a stretch. It's really kind of like more my hope and my need, okay, which is that that professionals know how to actually put pen to paper what you're doing, being able to document what you're doing with caregivers. If you're talking about, working with caregivers, how does that become part of a treatment plan for clinicians? How does that become part of a case management plan where you're looking at goals, approaches? What's the empirical piece that's going to let you know that you're accomplishing your goals? And actually, so what I've tried to do here is actually provide a format that you could actually use as a possible document to help you incorporate the way you're supporting caregivers in kinship families. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about what the modules look like. So let's see, Ro, I guess at this point, I'm going to go to the video. So that means I need to share and go here, and I can start right there. Okay. what I'm going to do now is show you basically it's a 2 to 3 minute clip to describe the modules and what they're about. This training is divided into modules, 6 modules, and each module highlights a particular strength in kinship care. The first module will be looking at attachments. And when I'm talking about attachments, there I'm talking about what's unique and significant about attachments between caregivers and their children, and why this is a strength, and why this attachment is so effective in kinship care. The second module is entitled Legacies. And in that module, I'll be talking about the strengths of kinship care as it relates to the sharing of traditions and values and history with the children between caregivers and birth parents, and why that's so significant. And also in that module, I'll also be able to talk about how you as a caregiver are able to interrupt cycles, create new legacies and new traditions so that you can break the cycles and the patterns that actually resulted in the children coming into your care. The third module is identity. And in that module, I'll be talking about how you as a caregiver prevent the loss of multiple identities that children experience in foster care. The identities related to culture and tradition and language and history. And in that one, I'll also be highlighting how you as a caregiver actually are involved in developing the identity of those children and being able to make sure that the children can avoid the types of decisions that resulted in them coming into care. The fourth module is entitled Healing. And in that module, I get a chance to talk about how you as caregivers can help the children recover from the losses and the trauma that results from separation from their birth parents. And I also am going to be highlighting how your sharing of your own personal losses as a relative and as kin to the birth parents also allows you to bond and attach with the children. In the fifth module, I'll be talking about adaptability. And in that one, I'll be talking about how kinship caregivers and how families within 24 to 72 hours are able to assume those roles and responsibilities so the children don't have to leave the families and go into care. In the sixth and final module, I'll be talking about co-parenting. And I'll be talking about that relationship between you as a caregiver with the birth parent that allows you to connect and develop a partnership, and how that pre-existing relationship is an advantage in terms of you being able to develop a partnership and co-parenting relationship with the birth parent. I'm also going to be talking about how to change the challenges that can come from that pre-existing history, and how we can make that relationship move from being a challenge to a positive asset in kinship families. Oh, Ro, can we go back to the slides? Okay. Ro, we're going to go to the next one. Thanks. What you just saw is actually part of the training. It is part of the videos. And my hope is what you just saw is something that I hopefully you would be able to use in introducing the videos to caregivers. So that was just a little bit of a clip of what you could use with caregivers when you're explaining and talking about the training. Would like to give you a description now of the training modules. Each module highlights a particular strength, and we just talked about what they were. The modules are divided into 2 parts. There are 2 videos in each of the modules. Part 1 talks about why a strength. That's the actual title of it. Why is that particular feature a strength? Why is attachment, legacy, identity a strength? And the second part, which is part 2, then talks about how do you use that strength? How do you use that attribute? How do you use that particular strength in working with the members of your family? And also in part 2, I even provide dialogues that you could actually use when you're talking with children, birth parents, and other members of the family as it relates to kinship care. Next slide. Well, thank you. The trainings, the videos are of me providing training to caregivers. Just as you saw just a few minutes ago, it was me speaking to caregivers, and that's basically what it is. 6 Zoom recorded modules of me speaking with caregivers and using the chat as a way of interacting and being interactive with the caregivers. Each module is approximately 30 minutes. Each video is approximately 30 minutes. Each module requires approximately 2 hours. What we're looking at here is each video is about a half hour. So we're looking about 2 hours of video, but I'm saying 2 hours to get through the module because there will be some activities and interactive involvement between the caregivers with the facilitator. So we're looking at a total length of training utilizing 6 modules, which is approximately 12 hours of training. Next, next slide, Rob. The training materials that you have in this package includes the videos that I just talked about. But in addition to that, there's also a facilitator's guide. And in that facilitator's guide, it provides outlines and scripts for the facilitators to use when when you're using the videos. It also provides timestamp outlines for when you can pause during the during the video so that there can be interactive discussions and moments and chats using the chat with the audience. I really didn't want this to be a talking head kind of presentation. Yes, I'm presenting, but at the same time, there need to be pauses that allow for interactive discussions. And we even have pauses that allow for activities. So you also have activities for individual and groups that you can implement during the videos. And there are even worksheets for how you can implement the activities. And again, these activities can be individual and groups. And we have takeaways as well that are included in the facilitator's guide, which summarizes each of the modules in each of the videos. Next one, Ro. Okay, thank you. Now, what I'm going to now do is kind of give you an example of what that training looks like. And by that, I'm talking about how do we integrate the use of the videos? How do we use the pause? How did I use activities? How did I insert activities during the training? What do those interactive discussions look like? And how do I use scripting as part of the training as well? So I'm going to try to combine all that for you. And I'm going to do that by talking about the role of birth parents in co-parenting. So that'll kind of like, here's the topic that you're going to hear me talking about. And you're going to see me combine all those things together and looking at this training. The use of the videos, the use of pauses, interactive discussions, activities, as well as how do we use scripting. So I'm going to start here by going to the videos. And I'm going to start with the video where I begin to bring up the subject of roles and co-parenting. And it's going to be to an audience that is not very receptive or feeling great about co-parenting. And I did that intentionally because a lot of caregivers feel like, hey, things are working. So I want you to kind of like, wanted to kind of like start this video off on co-parenting, having you be prepared for resistance and having to get buy-in. So here we go. Okay. Now I'd like to ask you a question. This may sound like a strange question, especially when I'm supposed to be talking about how to work together with birth parents. But here's the question. What are some of the reasons
And what would be some of the concerns that would make you consider not wanting to co-parent with the birth parent? And I'll repeat that. What are the reasons, what are the fears that would make you consider not wanting to work or co-parent with the birth parent? So if you would, take a few minutes and put that in the chat. And Candy, I'm going to turn it over to you, okay, at this point to, if you could kind of summarize what some of the responses are to that question. Reasons, fears, and concerns that would make you not want to co-parent with the birth parent.
Okay. We already have some coming in. One says they assaulted me and the children.
Wow.
I fear that I would always be blamed for the problems.
Okay.
Every family needs a head.
Okay.
They are always high.
Wow. Okay.
They never stick to their word. They are unreliable.
Okay.
Can't trust them.
Safety issues.
Fear they may take the children and run.
Wow. Okay.
The exposure to violence and outside forces. I don't know where they are, so I can't contact them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Pretty comprehensive. And legitimate reasons. The reason why, well, I was getting ready to tell you the reason why why I asked those questions, but I'd like you to answer it. And I'd like you to answer it by me telling you a story about a caregiver. This was a caregiver that pretty much listed just what you did. The safety issues, the broken promises, being in cycles of addictions, not knowing where the birth parents were, afraid of abductions, sabotaging, homelessness. But yet and still, this was a caregiver that would at least twice a year go out, find, track down the birth father, and would take a phone to him and ask him to do two things. Call or either text right there with her, the child, his daughter, and say, I love you, I'm thinking about you, and listen and help your grandma. That's it. That's all she would ask him to do. I love you, I'm thinking about you, listen and help your grandma. Now, with all those problems that you just listed and reasons, which were very similar to hers, why does she still do that? Let me ask the question this way. What is it that she felt he could give the children that she couldn't? That's the question. What is it that she felt he could give the children that she couldn't? And why did she track him down? So if you could just take a few minutes to answer that question, then we can kind of summarize that. So Candy, I'm going to turn it back over to you again. And again, the question is, what is it that she felt he could give the children that she couldn't?
I have the child needed to know that her father loved her. They mattered to their birth parent, validation.
Wow. Okay.
Grandma can't be dad.
Wow. You just hit it's that last one. That was the reason why she couldn't go out. Why she had to go out and find him. She realized, and for a lot of caregivers, I think it can be very frustrating, how can you love someone that isn't taking care of you? How can you love someone who hurt you? How could you love someone that you've never ever lived with. And that's why I asked that question. And that's what she realized. Even with the child loving someone who didn't care, loving someone that they didn't live with, loving someone who was hurting them, why would this child still need them? And you just hit it on the head. That birth parent was able to provide love. That birth parent was able to provide a sense of belonging. And the birth parent also provided normalcy for that child. That child at some point wants to feel like every other child, like I have a parent. So I think when caregivers realize that, the importance of it, then you can assign those roles that I have listed here. And I have to thank
Okay. I'm stopping right here because at this point, after asking, at this point, if you notice, I stopped right here because you can pause just like I just did just now. And those questions about why did that grandparent go out to look for the birth parent, those discussions around what were the type of reasons for not wanting to go co-parent, those are pause moments that you can now interact with your audience around. They can respond before you hear from the video. They can discuss reasons for why they don't want to co-parent or haven't been co-parenting. So they get a chance to actually answer the question before the audience out of your audience, before the caregivers do that in the video. The other thing you could do, you could reverse that, let the caregivers in the video respond and then allow the audience to talk. And then you can then do some comparison, do some discussions, and and then summarize what they were saying. So those are that's what I mean by using the video, being interactive, allowing some pause moments, and at the same time being able to open up the discussion with your audience around co-parenting. Now, I'm going to now switch to another segment because what you can do here now, what you're about to see me do here now, is to get the audience ready to do an activity, which I'm going to be referring to from the training guide. And this is an activity with the graphic, with the chart that they'll be able to use in actually deciding how do you want to assign roles. So I'm going to switch to another video. And in that video, what I'd like you to do, now I'm talking to you as if you're caregivers. What I'd now like you to do is to watch this video, and I'd like you to look at the different kinds of roles that you might assign the birth parent. Of course, that means that you felt as though that the birth parent has something constructive, something useful for your children. Once you've made that decision, then you've got to think about what's the role that they could possibly assume in helping you and also helping the child. So here are some ideas around possible roles. And what I want you to do also is as you're hearing the roles, keep them in mind because I'm going to have us an activity where you're going to be looking at assigning these roles to the birth parents in your family.
Now, these roles are interesting. The theory behind these roles, the formula behind these roles are you need to give birth parents the roles that match their parenting skills. I'm matching roles with the birth parents' abilities. And these roles are based on competencies. Sometimes you just want that birth parent to be simply a contact person, a voice over the phone. I'm thinking of the birth parents who are heavy into addiction, that are into a real depression cycle, that are homeless, that don't follow through with visitations. At this point, all you want them to maybe be is a voice on the phone. And maybe that's as far as they can go. And in fact, you may even have to be on the other end of the phone when they're talking to the kids. Okay, I'm seeing the nodding. Okay, right, because their role simply is to just maintain contacts with the kids. You know what made me think of just contact with the kids is working with kids in foster care, and all they may have is this folded up piece of paper or this folded up letter where they've taped together, and all they have is that contact and that memory with mom and dad. But that gives them a sense of identity and a sense of connection and a sense of belonging. And that's all that picture may represent. That's all that voice may be. And the conversation sounds like this. How you doing, baby? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so good to hear from you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, honey. I love you. Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me, sweetie. Take care. Bye-bye. Love you. That's it. That might be all you want from them. Okay? But that might be the best that they're good for at this point in terms of parenting competency. They can give the child a sense of connection and a sense of being loved and a sense of having a parent. All kids need to feel as though they have a parent. They need to feel that connection. Sometimes the next level is maybe being a supportive friend. That conversation sounds like, yeah, baby, how you doing, sweetie? How's everything going? Tell me about what's happening in school. What are the events that's happening in school? All they are is a friend. Have you ever seen caregivers? Have you ever seen birth parents where they're better at being friends with the children than parents? They know all the latest dances. They know all the music. They know all the stars. They can have conversations about technology, but they're not too good at being a parent in terms of setting limits, being role models, being able to discipline. But that's all you want from them to be at this point is a friend. They may not be visiting at this point, but that's all they are, support friend. Now, these are for birth parents who can be a little more than just support. These are birth parents who can actually listen. But all they're doing is, oh yeah, I hear you. Oh, is that what's going on? You know what? It sounds like to me you need to talk to who? Grandma. That's all the conversation sounds like. You get them to talk about it, ventilate it, and then redirect them back to grandma. That's all you want from them. And that's what they're good for. Being a friends, being listening. And if they can agree to that, then you allow them to have the conversations to make that contact. But that's the role. Just read them back, redirect them back, brainstorm with them. Sounds like you need to go back too. And then advisors, these roles here, they're getting pretty sophisticated now. These are the ones you can probably do overnights. They'll probably be able to do day visits, but they can be advisors, problem solvers, disciplinary. And these are the roles that you have when the caregiver, where the birth parent can actually be a parent. But those other roles are the ones that you may want to consider, but it's all about matching the role with their competency.
Um,
Odds and collude with the children against each other, and then help the children reframe and direct their issues and feelings back to you. Have consistent rules, follow through, make sure they know about the hierarchy, and don't compete by trying to buy their love.
okay. What I now want to do is actually show you the activity that you can now introduce after seeing that video. And that looks like this. Here's the chart. Go back to being a caregiver again. Now, after having looked at that video and thinking about the different roles, what I'd now like you to do is to look at this chart that each one which was sent to you prior to the training. And in that chart, you're going to be looking at just what we talked about. And here are the instructions. Read through the different roles that a birth parent can have and competencies that come from each role. Circle where you believe the birth parent currently fits, and then put a star beside where you would like them to be. So this is the activity that the caregivers can do one-on-one. They can do this as a group, and then they can come back together as an aggregate. So I'm going to kind of wind down here because I think we may need to get into some of what Angelique has to present. But I just wanted you to see the combination of the video, how you can pause at any point to be interactive with your audience, how you can use the video and the chat from the caregivers to have discussions with your audience, and then also what those activities can be for caregivers that also makes them more interactive, that looks at how they can actually apply it on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Angelique, do I have 2 more minutes or? Oh, you're muted.
I was going to say your part is what everybody came to hear. So
Oh,
you do what you need to do, and I will click through quickly.
okay. All right. Um, you become caregivers again. Okay. I'm now going to be saying to you, now these roles have to be assigned by you. You're the one who has to decide that they're competent. But you may also have to get the birth parents to buy into wanting those roles and accepting those roles, because you have to remember they were parents that were totally in control, and now they have to share that control and power with you. So how do you get that buy-in, and what do some of those scripts look like? What are the things in the conversations you might want to have with the caregiver, with a birth parent, to get them to consider the new roles that you're suggesting and that you want to assign?
In. Here's a conversation about getting the birth parents' buy-in. The children can be in a home where you can monitor their safety and well-being, and you can have input into their care. And again goes back to your being a parent doesn't start when they return to you. It starts now while they're still with me. They need to see your influence. They need to see your input. They need to know that you're involved in what we're doing. You have and this will also give you the time to do what you need to do to show you are able to care for your children. This is the buy-in around their own needs. They need this time to be competent. They need this time to get the shelter, to get the job, to complete rehab. They need to put their needs first at this point so that they can put the children's needs ahead of them later.
So what I'd now like you to do is to go to a chart that we've looked at that looks at how you might have those kind of discussions and what they may sound like. In this chart, you'll notice that we talked about how do you elicit birth parents buy-in. And these are some of the possible suggestions in terms of what those conversations might sound like. You may even also have to have conversations about the past. How do we dismantle the past? What does that look like? What are you going to do differently? How is that communication going to be different now that the children are into your home? But the exercise that we'd like you to now do is to think about what can you use? What fits? What that conversation sounds like? What's comfortable for you? And if it doesn't feel comfortable for you, what resonates with you and what might you want to do different? And this is something that you can do now individually. And then we're going to take a few minutes for you to share that with your partner. And then we're going to bring everybody back together so that we can see what people are doing as far as getting birth parents to buy into the training and buy into the new roles. Okay, so that's a little piece, okay, of how you can put all those pieces together, the video, the interactive piece in terms of the chat, the interactive discussions, the activities that we have here as well. And I should know there's the one last thing that I had talked about, and that was takeaways. So we have these items that are also in the facilitator's guide that summarizes each module, okay, and even gives you criteria in this particular module on deciding when and when not to co-parent. Remember I said we could talk about how to incorporate that into your plans and into your case management plan. Here's an example. You can do an assessment with that family looking at these questions. Then we've got the empirical pieces that you need to use to get information to answer the question. Is the birth parent emotionally, physically stable enough to parent? Is the birth parent able to accept their roles and guidelines provided? But that means they have to be able to accept loss and grief. Are they able to prioritize the children's needs over theirs, even though it's painful? And can they keep the children out of the role of consoling the birth parent because of their loss? So those are the kinds of things that you can now list in one category as goals and tasks. You can then look at action items, the empirical pieces you need under the bullets. And then the next column can look at what services and resources do you need in order to accomplish these tasks. And then you've got the timelines for working with the birth parent, working with the child, and working with the caregiver, because you may have to go multidimensional in terms of getting people ready to meet these standards that you're looking at in deciding whether or not you should go parent. So that's what I mean by taking pen to paper. I'm dating myself, keyboard to text, okay, so that you now have something empirical, something that you can read that actually looks at what your plan is going to be as a case manager. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Angelique, and I hope that was useful to give you a feel for what the training's like. Thank you. I have to stop share. And there we go. Okay.
Perfect. And Ro, you can throw our slides back up. Thank you. I'm going to click through quickly here. So we're going to skip this slide and we're going to skip the next slide and go to slide 3. So I want to tell you a little story about how a 5-minute hallway conversation at the Child Welfare League of America conference led to our partnership. And all it takes is a 5-minute hallway conversation to make this happen. And so we had this conversation, in April at the Cedar Lake conference, and Dr. Crumbley was talking to me about this training, and I'm like, asked him if he had evaluated it, and he goes, no. And I'm like, let's work together. Let's do that. And so as many of you on the call know, I'm the evaluator for the Washington State Kinship Navigator program. So I had, after this 5-minute hallway conversation, went to my state colleagues. And in Washington State, Kinship Navigator is run by both the Washington State Aging and Long-Term Care Service Administration in partnership with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And so it is really designed to serve formal and informal families. And as all state child welfare authorities, there's a movement towards greater placements of children in kinship care. So certainly the State Child Welfare Authority had an interest in kinship specific training, but our kinship navigators were also interested for doing something for the informal families. So we all came together and said, how can we build a training that works for both formal families and informal families? And our folks that support formal kinship caregivers have more structured opportunity for training. And for our kinship navigators and support group leaders, they wanted the flexibility to be able to do it in a way that works in support groups. So we thought this is such a beautiful opportunity to really look at how this training could work in both of these spaces. So Dr. Crumbley came and did a train the trainer session with our formal trainers, and in Washington State, our formal trainers is a partnership between the State Department of Children, Youth, and Families and our Alliance, which is the training arm of our state child welfare agency. And then our kinship navigator crew, who brought our support group partners, many of them who are also kinship navigators themselves. And so they were trained together. And then we did both survey data collection, watching how the trainers applied this training. We also collected data from our trainers on adherence to the training module. And so we have more data than we could possibly share with you today. So I'm clicking through, you'll have access to the slides, and we're in the process of finalizing a report that once the state approves, we'll share with Generations United so they can share that with you, so you can have the much more nuanced details of the full evaluation. Next slide. All right. So just in a highlight, we had 10 facilitators that participated in the training. Again, a mix of those who do focus on formal families and those who focus on informal families. So the trainer in total took 27 hours of Dr. Crumbley really supporting and walking through the trainer, so they felt confident to be able to relay this information, utilize the facilitator's guide, and champion these discussions, as this example was laid out by Dr. Crumbley with you today. And then the evaluation team created both satisfaction surveys as well as knowledge tests to help understand what that growth was for our caregivers who participated in this training, both before and after exposure to each of the modules. Now, there was no mandate that our caregivers had to sit through all 6 modules. We were flexible in terms of who could participate. And so what you'll see is each module was evaluated independent of one another because our audience changed with each of the modules. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the demographics, our trainers reflect, who lives in Washington State. So majority white, majority of our trainers were female. We had a mix of our Alliance trainers or our formal kinship care trainers, our kinship navigators service the informal kinship care population. And then we also had our support group leaders. So a good mix. And then we had, which we're very excited by, and from our administrative leadership in the state, who was very interested in seeing this roll out and wanted to understand it intimately so they could be champions for the cause, which is wonderful to have in a state partner. So in terms of knowledge at pre, we for the informals, they could have been working with kids for years. For our formal kinship caregivers, they could either be in the newly licensed process or they could be using this for maintenance hours. So as Dr. Crumbley testified in his presentation, that, a lot of these families have the skill set, right? It's just getting the chance to recognize that through their support networks, which is our formal folks, including our trainers, as well as our caseworkers and extended family members, for our informal folks, navigators as well. So we did see gains in knowledge, but a lot of these families knew, had these inherent strengths and were able to testify to that. In terms of satisfaction, overall, we had super high satisfaction in this training. Caregivers absolutely responded well and really loved it, and that included both our formal and informal caregivers. In terms of feedback, our caregivers wanted more opportunity to practice. And then our support group trainers in particular gave us some really great feedback on how to adapt the training to work in the support group context. And so we have some of those specific recommendations included in this evaluation that you'll hear momentarily. Next slide. All right, so in terms of our caregivers that participated through the training, we had 63 total, and we only included caregivers who participated in both the pre and post tests. So we did have more, but the evaluation is focusing on just those that did both pre and post test work. We also asked our facilitators, our trainers, to complete fidelity forms so we could understand during each of these training sessions, were they able to get through all of the training as it was designed? Did they make any adaptations to it? So we wanted to track all of that. And then we had our formal kinship caregivers register for the training through the Alliance training website for formal caregivers. And then our support group folks were informal, right? If they showed up to a support group on a day that we're scheduled to have these discussions, they were participating in it. It was that simple and left to be that flexible. For folks that consented to participate, we did collect some basic demographic information from our caregivers. Our pre-post questions, we kept them short so that it could be done very quickly and not be disruptive to the training process or take too much of the time that was allocated for training. So we did 5 questions. That was it of the major takeaway notes or highlights that Dr. Crumbley had talked to you about, those takeaway messages. So those pre-post tests were based on that. We also had some quick and easy scale-based satisfaction questions. And then we wanted to hear open feedback that any caregivers would have about their reaction to the training, or what really moved them, or takeaway points that they thought were important to them, so that we could document those. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to skip over the trainer specific training details because of time today, but they are in this slide, so you can refer back to them later. Next slide. Yeah, just you can see that for our formal trainers, they were able to successfully complete 82% of all of the activities and discussions that were designed. There were a few mostly related to time constraints that they weren't able to complete. So we got some detailed information about which ones were skipped and why they made those choices. Again, we won't have time to go over that today, but you'll have it as part of this, both the report and these PowerPoint slides that you can refer to at a later time. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to really highlight for you today, what did our caregivers really love? And I'm so glad Dr. Crumbley shared the videos, because that was definitely their favorite part. They absolutely loved watching those videos and interacting with those videos. And you saw that happen even today in the chat. The videos were asking the questions, so we had people live today responding to those questions in addition to the folks that were recorded in the video. And it really makes a rich discussion that people loved. Folks loved the interactivity, the activity designs. They loved the flow of the modules. And then the discussion prompts were really valuable, and caregivers were really appreciative of being able to have those structured conversations. So one of the things, and this is something that our support group leaders talked about, is, the videos are long because they're up to 30 minutes each. And so for our support group folks, they really focused their support group time on the activities and the discussions rather than utilizing those videos, because of one of the main things that's important to the structure for support group is having that time for caregivers to dialogue with each other about challenges and learning from each other. And so our support group leaders really prioritize the activities over the videos. Our formal trainers were able to really use all the videos, the activities, the discussion guide, everything, because of the structure you can have with formal training. Okay, next slide. All right, and so we did a more in-depth discussion with our informal support group leaders because we wanted to have more information for them on how do you make a training fit a support group structure. And so I wanted to take time to share those results with you, because I think this is great feedback. And any of you that are on the call that are run support groups or are interested in how can you translate a formalized training to work in a support group structure, these support group leaders had some fantastic advice for you on how to do that. And so there's a few different ways in which this particular training was done. Some folks used it in one-on-ones, and for formal caregivers, it's easy to be able to do this one-on-one with kinship navigators. You could do it one-on-one with caseworkers if you're in the formal system. So it can easily be used to address real-time situations where the training is attending to a specific issue that a caregiver might be having in real time. Our support group leaders were really excited about taking out pieces of each of these trainings and being able to use it to facilitate structured conversation and support families and support groups who were living with similar types of situations, and really opened the dialogue to have those structured conversations, and co-parenting being one of those. And you saw the example of how that structure can occur. And then creativity of being able to provide training during like a lunch and learn session. Not all caregivers are retired. Many of them work full-time jobs. So having the flexibility to offer, a session over a lunch hour was something that a lot of folks loved, the flexibility and how this could be utilized with caregivers. Okay, so one of the things that our support group leaders specifically gave some advice is they would love to see like one-pagers of the major takeaway points. And you'll see that in the facilitator's guide, but that guide isn't shared with caregivers, right? It's designed for trainers. So they're like, let's have one-pagers that we can give as takeaway points for in our support groups so that families can take that with them. In terms of the videos, the support group leader suggested like cutting it up and having it be shorter pieces that they can break up, because 1 30-minute video is too much time during a support group to be able to have it in its entirety. So they would love shorter clips of takeaway points that they could show. And they said that would help them be able to use the videos where the full 30 minutes is too hard in a support group setting to be able to have. Okay. And then we had a support group leader said that some of the titles of the trainings, if they were modified a little bit, that could help them resonate more in a support group setting. There was no issues or concerns with the titles for our formal groups. Next slide. Okay. So this is just a quote from one of our trainers to talk about their experience being a trainer and doing this in the moment. And this was reported on one of their Fidelity forums. So they said that for them in our formal training with our formal caregivers, they said the videos were short enough so there was time to allow participants to reflect and share in an unstructured way. And so for our trainers that were training formal caregivers, they really, really liked that opportunity. Next slide. All right. For the sake of time, you can read demographics on your own. So I just want to go right into the results. So if we could skip this slide. All right. So this is the pre-post test results for the caregivers that participated. And you can see we had some really great knowledge growth from pre-test, meaning before exposure to the curriculum, to post-test, which was after. And so we had statistically significant gains in several of the training modules, with the legacies module, the healing module, and the co-parenting modules having the biggest aha moments from pre to post in terms of knowledge gain with caregivers, and that this was irrespective of being a newer kinship caregiver versus a well-established kinship caregiver. So I think that's an important point, that even seasoned caregivers found good new learning in this training. Next slide. All right. In terms of satisfaction was pretty high overall. The highest score you could get was 6, and the lowest score we saw was 4.7. So that's pretty satisfied overall. And that's 4.7 to 5.1 for module specific, and then overall satisfaction was even higher. And so in terms of some of the quotes from our caregivers, the caregivers said the training content was easy to understand, loved the ability to participate in conversations during the training. And then our caregivers loved our trainers. Our trainers did a really great job soaking in that information for Dr. Crumbley and applying it in the settings that they were in, whether it was the formal training setting or the support group setting. The lowest rating item was length of training day, and this one is biased towards our formal kinship. They have more structure, they have longer training days, and so you'll see that reflected. And that was a perk of the pilot support group site, right, which had shorter little snippets in terms of their exposure to the material. Next slide. All right. And so this is what our participants suggested is how the training experience could be even better for them. They wanted more practice time and more time to connect with each other. They said offer more trainings or content. Like they said, offer it often enough that people can attend. We were doing a pilot, so we had a fixed number of times where the modules could be offered. And so as you know, not every person got to participate in every single module. So folks were begging for more opportunities for the training to be offered more often so they could participate in ones that they couldn't make the scheduled time for. And then for our support group leaders, they offered some really great recommendations on how to shorten content so that they could be able to use the video specifically in a support group structure. Next slide. Okay, and so these are open-ended responses on how the participants most appreciated about the training. They loved reflecting on the learning concepts and being able to have open and honest conversations about their experiences and relating it to the training that they were learning about. And like they said they felt like the training reflected their experiences personally, and that had great value and meaning to them. They loved the opportunity to have structured conversation and in a community context. So they appreciated open discussion, having community when having those discussions. They said that was really, really valuable. They said they felt when they could ask questions and not be judged, and that was a really comforting way to learn. And then the facilitator talked about, and the doctors were talking about Dr. Crumbley here, not me. The doctor's knowledge and ability to inform caregivers of issues I've not been able to resolve independently. And so the appreciation of Dr. Crumbley's knowledge in the field and as a trainer was super well received. Next slide. All right. This is a quote from, again, another Fidelity form from one of our pilot site caregivers. And they said, I appreciate that it was offered at all. That alone shows care for caregivers. So again, other states that are listening, caregivers are craving caregiver education, particularly relevant caregiver education, appreciating not having to attend a training for foster and adoptive parents where they might not see the content being relevant to them, right? So, and they're saying we need support to keep our parenting fresh. It's offering a safe place to expand on our personal growth. We take what we need and leave what we don't need. And this was a seasoned caregiver saying, I needed to freshen up, and it was appreciated. I don't know it all or think of all of it. And so understanding that caregiver education is not just for new caregivers that are going through licensing process, but there's a desire for refreshers, even from our seasoned caregivers. And I thought that was such an important quote that I wanted to share. Next slide. All right. So after we had finished this evaluation, we had some dialogue with our wonderful trainers who helped make this evaluation possible. And they were already asking us about what's going to be the follow-up to this evaluation. And of course, as an evaluator, I get pretty geeked when I talk to folks in the field in practice who are already thinking about where could we take this next. And so this will be a conversation we have with our state colleagues about what is the possibility of taking this evaluation to a next level. And certainly all of you on the phone know and understand that caregiver education is a family first prevention service supported activity. It requires an evaluation that has both an intervention and a control, which we did not have here. We did longitudinal tracking in this evaluation so that we could complete it quickly to support understanding, how this training would land with an audience. And so that was our original intent for this evaluation. But asking for follow-ups to be able to continue to really look at the impact this training could have in the community. And I think it's always amazing and wonderful to see our practice participants get geeked about evaluation and wanting to take the deeper dive. So they provided a couple of things that they were asking us as evaluators to do to support that work. One, asking us to plan follow-ups to connect with the trainers as they've had more opportunities for more cohorts to understand how that implementation might have changed over time, or as they got to be more seasoned in this curriculum in particular, how they may have adapted or changed it with different personalities and different cohorts. And then finally, wanting us to also do follow-ups with caregivers to understand how they applied it in their homes after receiving the training. And so that was exciting to see the field get excited about evaluation. Next slide. All right, so I went through that super quick, and I know we're a little bit over time. I don't know, Melissa, if you think we have time for a question or two.
So I don't see there's questions about whether the presentations will be sent, and yes, they will. I don't know if there's any other questions right now, but I know that we went through Dr. Day's slides very quickly, so I would ask that you all take time when you receive them and go through them. If you have questions about the study, feel free to reach out to us. I will put Oh, actually, here's one question. I work in Washington State. How can I advocate for this training to continue?
I think our DCYF is actually really supportive of this. And we have a really great partnership in Washington State with both the State Child Welfare Authority and the Aging and Long-Term Care Services. It was a partnership across these two state agencies that brought this training to the state. And so I think based on the evaluation, you're probably in good shape. It never hurts to advocate with your state leadership. But I think they're on board with you in this case.
Let's see if there's anything else. My colleague Mari just put our website in the chat. You can also put questions, send us questions through our request assistance about this presentation, and we will forward those to Drs. Crumbley and Day accordingly to follow up. And I want to thank you all for sticking around. I know it was a lot of information to cover. And I want to thank Dr. Crumbley and Dr. Day so much for coming today and sharing their expertise and information about this study and, of course, the training modules.
And in terms of accessing this, if you're not from Washington State, remember Washington State signed up to be a pilot just to support Dr. Crumbley in understanding the impact and effectiveness of his training. It wasn't designed specifically for Washington State. They were just served as a pilot site. So Dr. Crumbley, I'm sure, can answer how folks in other states can access this training.
Yeah. So, and then there was a question about how can we market training to get participants to engage? I guess that's just a general training question, right?
Yeah, if folks have time to hear, I know we had some really great strategies in Washington State. One is we had these two different arms that were targeting two different populations, right? We had our formal kinship care, and they registered for it like you would register for licensing training, and so that was following policies and procedures related to licensure, really supported that. And for our informal caregivers, it was creating the flexibility with the training that you don't have to participate in all of them, right? And having informal conversations and utilizing that existing support group structure, and folks who value that community that comes with being a part of a support group structure and utilizing that existing vehicle for training. And so those were two different ideas. We tried it both ways. It was well received in both strategies, which is great. But as you can tell, this there were a lot more modifications that happened to make it work in a support group structure. And it was wonderful to have the flexibility through Dr. Crumbley to not be so rigid with how the training had to be implemented, the flexibility of their purveyor to make it work in the setting in which it was applied. So I know that not all trainers and purveyors allow that. And I think that's an important point to the success of this particular curriculum.
Excellent. Any final questions? We had someone here from the UK and they're going to bed. So
we appreciate
yeah, it's great
folks
to have international participation today.
That's my preference.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. And thank you so much, Dr. Day and Dr. Crumbley. We really, really appreciate your time and expertise. Always value it.
Oh, thank you.
I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and thanks for joining us today.